Welcome to the CloudFabrix AIOps virtual conference. In this segment, we're going to cover customer success story specific to the healthcare segment. I'm Anand Louis, Director of Customer Success Management at CloudFabrix. We deployed a couple of very large healthcare providers, and this is one of the example. This is a US nationwide healthcare provider with around 50,000 nurses, physicians, and hundreds of hospitals nationwide. What the IT team is responsible for and where CloudFabrix is deployed, it has around 7,000 healthcare production grade applications running. They have 12 national data centers. And from an install base, they have on-prem, which is the majority, and they have a few cloud assets. From a networking point of view, they are multi-vendor, dominated at 90% by Cisco, and they have also other vendors like Juniper, Palo Alto Networks. The IT team's responsibility expands also to the compute side with virtual machines, bare metal servers, and security with firewalls and load balancers. So what's the business challenge that they have currently and how do they resolve it? The current operating model, specifically with COVID, was challenging them because they needed to do more with less, with the reduced OpEx spending. And they wanted to go more to IT as a service model, where they were able to respond faster to SLAs and lower the mean time to repair. So, what was the business ask? The business ask was to digitalize and automate all operations for the three main teams that were using AIA. First one is the budgeting and planning team. Second was the maintenance and operations team. And what were the operational asks for CloudFabrix? First of all, to be accurate in the asset collection, lifecycle management, and reporting. And also automate all the budgeting reports, planning reports, plan of record, and also the chargeback reports, because this customer has to show back to the business units what was consumed, how much was actually utilized on the infrastructure dedicated to the business unit. From an operational aspect, they also wanted to know which applications will be impacted when an upgrade happens, either hardware upgrade or software replacement. And all this was also, they also wanted to have an executive dashboard to see all these critical reports, asset lifecycle management, support, contract management, as well as the operational aspects of the asset lifecycle management. A little bit on the customer context. We already talked about the size of the environment, 6,000 production grade applications. The unique aspect here is that they were doing quite a bit of changes, hundreds of changes in the infrastructure to upgrade the hardware replacement, or software needs to get updated on the same infrastructure. That could be for virtual machines, switches, firewalls. The way the data was computed, the asset inventory and the lifecycle report and the application dependency mapping reports, was manually computed. So they were using a lot of contractors to compute the data, to collect, and to bring it to leadership, to the different working teams for the upgrade itself. This had a tremendous impact on OpEx because this was expanding the number of contractors they needed to use. And it was, since the environment is getting bigger and bigger and more complex, this OpEx was increasing on a regular basis. And most importantly, the data was not accurate. It took them 2 to 3 weeks to calculate the data, and it was error prone. And when it came to upgrades, they were experiencing significant degraded SLAs. Applications were not fully brought back after the maintenance, and they had to maintain large level 3 teams to support the application bring up after the upgrade was done. So how did we do that? First, we deployed AIA, Asset Intelligence Analysis. That's the core of the product that connects to multiple sources to bring in the data and generate the reports. The first, starting from the bottom left, we had deployed what we call the CloudFabrix Edge Collector. So these are small collection engines without any agentless collection engines that would go and hit the data center assets, facilities, or campus and branch offices and collect the data and bring it into the fabric. The second was via API integration and also from what the vendors would tell us in terms of end of life, end of sale assets, and also support contracts that were covering the existing assets under maintenance contract, and all the details were imported as well. From the partners, these are partners that are selling into the customers, what were the assets that the customer had actually purchased? And from the customers themselves, we get what we call the standards, the dictionaries. What is the hardware and the software standard that they consider to be standard, acceptable, or non-standard? So this will put the hardware and software in three different categories, as well as the price list and the discounts they would be getting from the vendors themselves. Based on all of this, we are able to generate first the lifecycle and supportability automatically. With the assets that we collected in all the dictionaries, you are able to see from your entire set of assets which ones are going to be end of life when, and provide also a projection in terms of which dates, either quarters or years, that the assets will be end of life or end of sale. The second has to do with the dependency mapping. We talked about it briefly, is we are able to compute and calculate extremely precisely which applications are running on which virtual machines, on which servers, but also from a networking point of view, we are able to look from the network into the virtual machines and into the servers, what is the infrastructure dependency mapping? So when you're planning for an application upgrade or an infrastructure upgrade, you can predict very precisely which apps need to be put in maintenance mode. So part of that upgrade process, we also provide what is called a pre and post-upgrade delta reports. So this is a report that is automatically generated on demand to see what was the status of the infrastructure before and after. So that tells you which IP addresses we have seen, MAC addresses, which applications have been seen on switches, on virtual machines, before and after the upgrade. Ideally, we want to see no changes before and after. The third report that we have is what we call the plan of record and compliance. So this has to do with the hardware and the software plan of record. So it will categorize the discovered assets, hardware and software, into the three different categories we mentioned above: standard, acceptable, and non-standard. So this allows you to be able to be extremely precise in understanding where the assets are. Are they meeting the recommended standards or not? The third has to do with capacity planning. So we are able to look, part of the collection mechanism, we're able to look at all the infrastructure assets and look at the utilization from a networking point of view, but also from a virtual, the VMs, to see what was getting utilized, what is underutilized, what is completely non-utilized based on past sampling data. And all of this is done near real time or on demand or scheduled manner. It takes around, for the 60,000 assets that are under management, it takes around 2 to 3 hours to calculate it, to compute it, collect, and bring it into the system. And all these reports on the right-hand side are automatically generated. We're going to show you a few examples of the auto-generated reports. Here's the asset inventory. So part of the collection mechanism, we are able to add additional attributes to the assets such as region, host name, site code, vendor, and family, device family, and plan of record as well. So these are all filters that get added to the asset itself that comes from the various sources, either by parsing the host name or by additional dictionaries that get added and uniquely identify the asset and these attributes. And of course, you can use to filter and be extremely precise in where the assets are located. The second report that is generated are capacity and utilization insights. We can look at the networking device, look at the average port utilization, or also tell you which devices have not been utilized at all. So that gives you a little bit of understanding of where the maximum utilization is happening, where it's underutilized, and where it is optimal. From a VM point of view, we can look at the counts, but also the average utilization and key critical KPIs such as memory, CPU, and storage by site, by region, by location. The report also that gets auto-generated is the lifecycle and supportability aspect. By looking at all the product IDs and the vendors, we are able to predict in a multi-vendor environment where the end of life is going to reside. So we can generate that by quarter or by year, when the asset is going to expire or is it already expired. And the compliance and standard is also extremely important for this customer, especially for the planning team. For both hardware and software, they need to know from a product ID or from a software version, where is the asset located? Is it in standard compliance, in acceptable compliance, or completely non-standard? So they are interested in knowing and aggressively going and keeping as much as possible the assets in standard and acceptable state. So we generate a detailed report to be able to tell you the count, where it's located, and you can go and plan for the upgrade specifically. And the last piece has to do with application dependency mapping. So these are the applications that are dependent on these set of infrastructure, either switches, virtual machines, and we can tell you all the details such as IP address, which MAC address we are seeing this from, which VLAN, and all these details that are critical to plan for the upgrade. So when an infrastructure upgrade happens, we can alert the application team, or when an application is going through an upgrade, we can watch out for all the infrastructure dependencies and see if there is any issue there. We also wanted to share you what the customer told us about their experience. So this is through Gartner peer review insight, and it's unsolicited feedback from the customer that says what was their use cases, what's the ROI they're looking at, and how long did it take from proof of concept to production, and what's the outcomes they are experiencing right now. A quick summary on the outcomes. Data acquisition and accuracy of data went significantly up. We are almost 100% accurate on what we are collecting. It's almost a plan of record from asset collection point of view. It used to take 2 to 3 weeks to calculate the data. It's taking less than an hour, at least for 30,000. For 60,000 assets, it takes 2 to 3 hours to calculate it. From an OpEx saving point of view, it is around 40% today, We believe it's going to be higher, around 80% after all the procedure and the adoption on the operation team happens. And most critically has to do with the maintenance incidents. Prior to our insertion, there were quite a bit of incidents because there were a lot of miscalculation and error-prone data that they were working with during maintenance. So a lot of apps used to go in a bad state. So it took them a long time to bring it back after the maintenance window closed. And we brought it down by 90%. We have a lot of collateral also that you can go and consult, data sheets, solution paper on our solution page under Asset Intelligence and Analytics. You can also reach out to us at info@cloudfabrix.com for a deep dive session. And most importantly, to see if you want to try it in your own environment and see the benefits that you might get by trying it out. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.